The sun was setting at Wonderwheel Park as 10-year-old Joy Walker looked at the old sign above the gates. Her nanny, Miss Faith, held her hand as they walked in. The park was very old now, with paint coming off the walls and rust on the metal gates. But Joy didn't mind. This was the last place she had seen her mom, Linda Walker, who worked here before she went missing 2 years ago. The smell of sweet candy and fresh popcorn was in the air, but something was strange today. This was the first time Joy had talked Miss Faith into bringing her back since her mom disappeared. Near the ticket window, an odd man named Mr. Mystery, that's what his name tag said, kept looking at them. He had bright silver eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. "Your mother really loved working here," Miss Faith said softly. Joy saw how scared Miss Faith looked when she gave their tickets to Mr. Mystery. He smiled with teeth that were too white and bright for such an old face. "I knew you would come back today, little Joy," he said, looking right at her. "The time spinner is ready for you." Joy stopped walking. The time spinner was what everyone called the park's special carousel because it was so old and beautiful. It was also her mom's favorite ride. She used to say it was magical, but Joy hadn't told anyone she wanted to ride it. How did Mr. Mystery know? Before Joy could ask him, he disappeared into his little ticket house. All that was left was a sweet smell, like candy canes mixed with old books. The park was empty, which was weird for a Saturday night. Their shoes made loud sounds on the broken ground as they walked past empty game stands and quiet rides. Then Joy heard music, not the happy kind she remembered, but a slow, creepy song that made her think of a music box playing in a dark room. When they walked past the mirror house, Joy saw it. The time spinner carousel stood alone, its gold poles shining bright, even though everything else in the park was old and dirty. The horses looked so real, like they might start breathing any minute. Their glass eyes caught the last bits of sunlight in a way that made Joy feel scared and excited at the same time. But what really caught her eye was a special horse, one that was pure white with rainbow-colored stars all over it. It was in the exact spot where her mom used to sit during her work breaks. "Miss Faith," Joy whispered, pulling on her nanny's sleeve. "That horse wasn't white before. It was brown, I remember." Miss Faith's face turned white with fear. "Joy, maybe we should leave." But Joy was already walking toward the carousel, pulled by the strange music and memories of her mom. The time spinner started moving by itself, very slowly, even though no one was running it. As Joy got closer, she saw something weird in the big mirrors around the middle of the carousel. Instead of showing her normal reflection, they showed different versions of her. Some older, some younger, some happy, some crying. A warm wind brought the candy cane smell back, and Joy heard Mr. Mystery's voice but couldn't see him anywhere. "Each time around makes you 1 year older or younger, dear Joy. Pick your ride carefully." When Joy touched the white horse's neck, everything went quiet. Then she saw something in the mirrors that made her heart jump, her mom's face, but she looked different, much younger than Joy remembered. She was trying to say something from inside the mirror, her face full of worry and fear. Behind her, Miss Faith screamed, but it sounded far away, like she was underwater. The white horse's glass eye blinked at Joy, a real blink, and suddenly Joy knew she was about to find out what really happened to her mom. The truth about why her mom never came home after her last ride on the time spinner was about to come out. But there was more. In another mirror, Joy saw a young girl who looked just like her, wearing the same clothes she had on right now. The girl was pointing at something behind the carousel. When Joy looked closer at the mirror, she saw numbers floating in the air behind her reflection. 2090. Something told her this number was important. It was the exact number of days since her mom disappeared. The white horse started to glow softly, and tiny sparkles of light fell from its rainbow stars. Each sparkle that touched the ground turned into a small clock that spun backward. Mr. Mystery's voice came again, this time in a whisper. "Time isn't just a line going forward, Joy Walker. It's a circle, like this carousel. Sometimes, to find what's lost, you have to go backward to move forward." Joy noticed something else too, a small door hidden in the carousel's center pole, with a keyhole shaped like a star. Around her neck, the star-shaped locket her mom had given her suddenly felt warm. Was this all just a coincidence? Or had her mom known about the time spinner's secret all along? As Joy stood there looking at her mom in the mirror, a cold wind blew through the park. The tiny clock sparkles stopped falling from the white horse, and all the carousel mirrors went dark at once. But one mirror stayed lit, the one showing her mom. "Wait!" Joy called out, pressing her hands against the mirror. Her mom was trying to tell her something, but no sound came out. Joy looked closer and realized her mom was writing something backward on the mirror's surface with her finger. Slowly, Joy read the letters. 3 rides forward, 2 rides back. Mr. Mystery appeared beside her so suddenly that Joy jumped. "Your mother was very clever," he said, playing with a ring of old keys on his belt. "She understood the time spinner's rules better than anyone, but understanding time doesn't mean you can control it." Miss Faith tried to grab Joy's arm. "We're leaving right now." But when she touched Joy, something strange happened. Miss Faith's hand went right through Joy's arm like she was made of fog. Joy gasped. She could see right through Miss Faith. "She's not real," Mr. Mystery said softly. "Miss Faith left the park an hour ago. What you see is just a time shadow, a memory of what already happened. The time spinner is beginning its magic." The carousel's music changed to a faster tune. All around them, ghost-like figures appeared, people from different times, all riding the carousel. Joy saw a girl in old-fashioned clothes from maybe 100 years ago, laughing as she rode a blue horse. Then she saw a boy in clothes that looked like they were from the future, riding a red horse that Joy could have sworn wasn't there a minute ago. The white horse with rainbow stars lowered its head, like it was bowing to Joy. Mr. Mystery held out one of his keys. It was shaped like a star, just like Joy's locket. "Your mother left this with me," he said. "She told me to give it to you when you were ready, but remember, the time spinner shows you what was, what is, and what could be. The hard part is knowing which is which." Joy took off her locket with shaking hands. It was glowing now, just like the white horse. She looked at the hidden door in the carousel's center pole, then at her mom's face in the mirror. Her mom was nodding, but she also looked scared. Just then, Joy noticed something else. In every mirror that wasn't dark, the numbers were changing. 2090 became 2189, then 2188, counting down like a timer. "What happens when it reaches 0? She asked. Mr. Mystery's silver eyes glowed brighter. "That's when all paths meet, dear Joy. When past, present, and future become one. Your mother found that moment once, and got lost in it." The white horse started moving on its own, stepping off the carousel platform. Its hooves made no sound as it walked toward Joy. In its glass eyes, she saw more numbers reflected. 3232 over and over like her mom's message. 3 rides forward, 2 rides back. "Choose now," Mr. Mystery said, backing away into the shadows. "The time spinner only offers this chance once every 290 days. When the moons align just right and time's doors open." Joy looked up sharply. "Moons? There's only one moon." Mr. Mystery smiled his too bright smile. "Are you sure about that? Look closer at the mirrors that aren't dark." When Joy looked again, she saw it. In each mirror's reflection, a different moon hung in the sky. Some were full, some were new, some were strange colors she'd never seen before. And in the mirror where her mom's reflection was, there were exactly 3 moons, forming a perfect triangle in the night sky. The countdown numbers spun faster. Joy had to make a choice, follow her mom's clue about the rides or find another way. But as she stood there, holding her star locket in one hand and Mr. Mystery's key in the other, she remembered something her mom once told her. Sometimes magic isn't about finding the right answer. It's about asking the right question. Joy turned to Mr. Mystery, her heart pounding. "Before I choose," she said, "tell me one thing. Why did you give my mom a job here exactly 2190 days ago?" For the first time, Mr. Mystery's smile disappeared. The silver in his eyes swirled like storm clouds, and the time spinner's music hit a wrong note that echoed through the empty park like breaking glass. Mr. Mystery's face changed. His perfect smile was gone, and for a second he looked like a scared little boy. "Your mother," he said in a shaky voice, "was not just looking for a job. She was looking for me." The white horse stomped its hoof and the sound echoed like thunder. More ghost people appeared around them, but these were different. They all looked like Mr. Mystery, but at different ages. A young boy with silver eyes playing with marbles, a teenager fixing the carousel's lights, an old man cleaning the mirrors. All of them were him, all with the same silver eyes. "I don't understand," Joy said, but even as she spoke, she saw something in her locket that she'd never noticed before. Behind the small picture of her mom was a tiny engraving, "To my dearest daughter, from LM." "LM?" Joy whispered. "Linda Mystery," Mr. Mystery said quietly. "Your mother, my daughter." Joy's head spun. That's impossible. You'd have to be your grandfather? Yes. And I've been stuck here watching this carousel turn for 50 years. Time doesn't move the same way for me anymore. Not since I first discovered what the time spinner could do. The countdown in the mirrors reached 1,000. The white horse nudged Joy gently, pointing its nose at a mirror that was starting to clear. In it, Joy saw her mom again, but this time as a little girl, riding the carousel with a younger Mr. Mystery. Your mother came here to save me, Mr. Mystery said. She found out about my past, about how I tried to use the time spinner to change something terrible that happened. But time has rules, Joy. Break them, and you become like me, scattered across time like puzzle pieces that don't fit together anymore. Just then, Joy noticed something odd about the star key in her hand. It wasn't one key anymore. It had split into 3 identical keys, and when she looked at her locket, she saw it had 3 keyholes now, arranged in a triangle like the 3 moons. The ghost of Miss Faith appeared again, but now she was saying something different from before. The answer is in the pattern, Joy. Why 3 rides forward? Why 2 back? Why 3 moons? Why 3 keys? Joy looked at everything around her. The 3 moons, 3 keys, the numbers, 3232, her mom's message about rides. Then she remembered something she'd learned in math class about patterns. But before she could say anything, the carousel started spinning backward by itself, faster and faster. Time's pulling apart, Mr. Mystery shouted. The ghost images of him began to fade away one by one. Joy, whatever you're going to do it now. Joy ran to the white horse, climbed on, and took out the 3 keys. But which keyhole should she use first? The mirrors were counting down faster now. 500, 400, 300. Then she saw it. In the mirror with her mom, something was written in tiny letters along the edge. The future unlocks the past, but the present holds them together. The horse's rainbow stars began to glow brighter than ever, and Joy suddenly knew what her mom had discovered. It wasn't about going forward or backward in time. It was about bringing all times together, just for one moment, just long enough to fix what went wrong. But as Joy raised the first key, she heard a new sound, a deep, rumbling laugh that seemed to come from inside the carousel itself. And when she looked at her reflection now, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Behind her stood a dark figure with no face, wearing a watchmaker's coat covered in spinning clock hands. Mr. Mystery saw it too, and his silver eyes went wide with fear. "The timekeeper," he whispered. "I should have known he'd come." The timekeeper moved like a shadow, its clock hands ticking in different directions. "So," its voice sounded like gears grinding, "another mystery tries to break my rules." Joy's hands shook as she held the keys. The countdown in the mirrors was at 200 now. The white horse turned its head to look at the timekeeper, and for the first time, Joy saw fear in its glass eyes. "Your rules are wrong." Mr. Mystery stepped forward, but he was fading more with each second. "Time isn't meant to be a prison." The timekeeper laughed again, and all the mirrors cracked a little. "Really? Then let me show young Joy what happened to those who thought like you." He waved his hand, and suddenly all the mirrors showed different scenes. In one, Joy saw her mom as a teenager, sneaking into the park at night. In another, she saw Mr. Mystery as a young man, crying over a newspaper that said local girl dies in park accident. Then she saw her grandmother, someone she'd never met, falling from the carousel when it broke down 50 years ago. "Your grandfather tried to save his wife," the timekeeper said. "Your mother tried to save her father, and now you're here to save them both." Such a touching family tradition. But Joy wasn't listening anymore. She was looking at the patterns in each mirror, how the 3 moons lined up differently in each one, how the clock hands on the timekeeper's coat spun in patterns of 3 and 2. Then she remembered what she'd learned about math patterns. Sometimes the answer wasn't in the numbers, but in what happened between them. "Mom wasn't trying to save anyone," Joy said quietly. The timekeeper stopped talking. "She was trying to free everyone." Joy jumped off the white horse and ran to the center pole. The countdown hit 100. Moving fast, she put the first key in the bottom right keyhole. "The future," she whispered, turning it. The timekeeper moved toward her, but the white horse jumped between them, its rainbow stars blazing. Joy put the second key in the bottom left keyhole. "The past," she said. "Stop her," the timekeeper roared. But now all the carousel horses came alive, forming a circle around Joy and the pole. The countdown reached 50. And the present, Joy said, putting the last key in the top keyhole, holds them together. She turned all 3 keys at once. There was a sound like 1,000 clocks striking midnight together. The timekeeper screamed, his coat of clock hands freezing in place. The mirrors spun around the carousel faster and faster, reflecting everything at once, past, present, and future all mixed together. Joy saw her grandmother falling, but this time the white horse moved to catch her. She saw her grandfather crying, but now her grandmother was there, alive and well. She saw her mother growing up, learning about the carousel's magic, finding the pattern that could break the timekeeper's power. The countdown hit 0. Everything stopped. Then everything moved at once. The timekeeper's coat began to tear apart, each clock hand flying off like leaves in a storm. "Impossible!" he shouted, but his voice was getting weaker. "The pattern. How did she—" "3 keys, 3 moons, 3 rides forward," Joy said, watching him fade away. "Because time isn't a straight line or a circle. It's a triangle. Past, present, and future all touching, all connected. Mom figured it out. The time spinner wasn't meant to change time, it was meant to connect it." The timekeeper dissolved into a shower of rusty clock parts, but something was still wrong. All around them, time was swirling like a tornado. Joy could see everyone she loved caught in it. Her mom, her grandfather, her grandmother, all spinning through different times, different ages, unable to stop. She had broken the timekeeper's power, but now time itself was breaking apart, and in the chaos, Joy heard her mom's voice, clearer than ever. "The pattern isn't complete yet, sweetheart. 2 rides back." The carousel spun wildly as pieces of time flew everywhere. Joy watched her family spinning through different ages. Sometimes her mom was a little girl, sometimes an old woman, changing every second. Mr. Mystery kept appearing and disappearing, his silver eyes flashing like lightning. 2 rides back, Joy whispered, thinking hard. Then she saw it. The white horse with rainbow stars was trying to show her something. In its glass eyes, she could see numbers flipping backwards. 2323. "It's not just going back," Joy said, suddenly understanding. "It's a full pattern. 3 forward, 2 back, 3 forward, 2 back, like a dance." She jumped onto the white horse just as the time spinner started moving on its own. Around her, the broken pieces of the timekeeper's clock hands spun in the air like autumn leaves. Each piece showed a different moment in time, some happy, some sad, all mixed up. "Hold on tight," the white horse spoke for the first time, its voice sounding like wind chimes. "We're going to weave time back together." The carousel began to move in a strange way, 3 spins forward, then 2 spins backward. With each turn, Joy saw her family's scattered pieces starting to pull together. She saw her grandmother as a young woman, laughing on the carousel. She saw her grandfather learning the carousel's secrets. She saw her mom growing up, all the moments happening at once. But something was wrong. Dark shadows were creeping up the carousel poles, the last traces of the timekeeper's power. They were trying to stop the pattern, to keep time broken. "Joy!" Her mom's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "The stars! Use the stars!" Looking down, Joy saw the rainbow stars on the white horse glowing brighter than ever. Each star was like a tiny mirror, reflecting a different piece of time. Without thinking, she reached out and touched one. It came off in her hand like a sticker. "Of course," Joy said excitedly. "We need to mark the pattern." As the carousel kept its strange dance, 3 forward, 2 back, Joy started placing stars at each turning point. The first star marked where her grandmother's fall was supposed to happen. The second marked where her grandfather first discovered the carousel's power. The third marked her mom's birth. Each star locked that moment in place, stopping it from getting mixed up again. The dark shadows tried to erase the stars, but each time they got close, the starlight grew stronger. It was working. The pattern was holding. Joy could feel time starting to heal itself, like a giant puzzle fitting back together. But then she heard a terrible cracking sound. The carousel's center pole was splitting open. Inside, instead of wood or metal, there was swirling silver light, like looking into a whirlpool made of mirrors. "The heart of the time spinner," the white horse said urgently. "If it breaks completely, all of time will pour out. We need one more piece to complete the pattern." Joy looked at all the stars she had placed. They formed a shape around the carousel, almost a complete circle, but with one gap. She reached for another star on the horse, but there weren't any left. Then she felt something warm around her neck. Her locket. It was glowing with the same rainbow light as the stars. Joy understood. She had been part of the pattern all along. This was why she needed to be here, at this exact moment. She took off her locket and held it up. The silver light from the center pole reached out like fingers, trying to grab it. The dark shadows swirled faster, making one last attempt to stop her. Through the chaos, Joy could see her family, all of them reaching out to her from different times, different ages, all with the same look of hope in their eyes. But before Joy could place the locket in the pattern's last empty spot, something unexpected happened. A voice that sounded like 1,000 clocks ticking at once echoed through the park. Did you really think it would be that easy to destroy time itself? From the scattered clock hands on the ground, a new shape was forming. The timekeeper was coming back, but this time, he wasn't alone. The broken clock hands spun together, creating not one but 3 timekeepers. Each one looked different, one made of rusted gears for the past, one of shining silver for the present, and one of swirling mist for the future. Foolish child, they spoke together, their voices making the carousel shake. We are time itself. We cannot be destroyed, only split and reformed. The white horse stood tall. Joy, don't listen, they're lying. They're not time itself, they're just its jailers. Joy looked at her locket, then at the empty spot in the star pattern. She had to think fast. The center pole was cracking more, silver light pouring out like water. Her family was still caught between times, reaching for her. Then Joy remembered something her mom used to say. Time is like a story, sweetheart. It only makes sense when you read all the parts together. Looking at the 3 timekeepers, Joy suddenly smiled. You made a mistake, she said. You showed me the truth by splitting apart. The timekeepers stopped moving. What? Look at yourselves. Joy pointed at each one. Past, present, future. Just like my keys. Just like the moons. You're not time itself, you're just pieces of the pattern. And now you've lined up exactly where I needed you. Before they could move, Joy threw her locket high in the air. The starlight from all the pattern points she'd marked shot up like beams, hitting the locket. It burst open, releasing a rainbow of light that formed a triangle around the timekeepers. No, they shouted, but they were trapped. Joy jumped off the white horse and ran to the center pole. Now she could see what was written inside, in the swirling silver light. Time is not meant to be kept, but to be shared. The horse spoke again. Quick, Joy, the pattern needs one more thing. A choice freely made. Joy looked at her trapped family, at the timekeepers, at the breaking carousel. She understood now. Taking a deep breath, she reached into the silver light in the center pole. I choose to let time flow as it should, she said clearly. Everything exploded in white light. When Joy could see again, she gasped. All around her, time was moving like a beautiful dance. She saw her grandmother's fall, but now she saw the whole story. The carousel hadn't broken. Her grandmother had seen a child about to fall and save them, falling herself instead. She lived, becoming the first person to learn the carousel's true magic. She saw her grandfather's tears, not of sadness but of joy when he found out his wife would recover. She saw her mom growing up, learning the carousel's secrets from both of them, understanding more and more. The white horse stepped forward, its rainbow stars now swirling around Joy like tiny comets. Your mother discovered the truth. Time doesn't need keepers. It needs witnesses, people to remember, to learn, to share stories. The 3 timekeepers were changing, their harsh forms softening. As Joy watched, they transformed into 3 simple hourglasses, each one filled with different colored sand, gold for past, silver for present, rainbow for future. But something was still missing. Joy's family was still frozen in time, even though they were whole again. The pattern needed one final turn. Joy picked up the 3 hourglasses, each one warm in her hands. The white horse nudged her gently, pointing its nose at the carousel's empty center pole. In the silver light, she could see 3 round spots perfectly sized for the hourglasses. But which one goes where? Joy wondered out loud. Then she looked at her locket's broken pieces on the ground. The photo inside had changed. Now it showed 3 generations of her family riding the carousel together, each sitting on a different colored horse. Gold, silver, and rainbow. The pattern, Joy whispered. It's not just about time. It's about family. She placed the gold hourglass at the bottom of the pole. The past, my grandmother. Then the silver one in the middle. The present, my mom. Finally, the rainbow one at the top. And the future, me. The carousel lit up like a Christmas tree. All the horses started to move, not in circles, but in a flowing dance that made Joy think of a family holding hands. The white horse joined them, its rainbow stars leaving trails of light that wove between the other horses like ribbons. Then she heard it, her grandmother's laugh, her grandfather's happy voice, her mother calling her name. They were coming back. But the silver light was starting to fade. Joy remembered what the horse had said about a choice freely made. She looked at her family, still frozen between moments, and knew what she had to do. "I could keep you all here," she said softly. "Keep us together forever on the carousel." But that's what the timekeeper did wrong, trying to hold on to time too tightly. Joy touched each hourglass gently. "I choose to let you go, to let time flow naturally, because love doesn't need magic to last forever. It just does." The moment she said these words, the hourglasses began to spin. Sand flowed between them, not just up and down, but in all directions, making patterns like stars and hearts and circles. The silver light grew stronger again, and this time it was warm and gentle. Her family began to move. First, her grandmother unfroze, looking exactly as she did in the old photos Joy had seen, young and brave and smiling. Then her grandfather's silver eyes cleared, showing all the love and wisdom he'd gained through his years watching over the carousel. Finally, her mother stepped forward, looking just as Joy remembered her. "My brave, smart girl," her mom said, hugging her tight. "You understood what I never could. Time isn't about keeping moments, it's about sharing them." The white horse stepped off the carousel one last time. Its rainbow stars floated around them all like tiny fireworks. "The time spinner's magic was never in its power to change time," it said. "It was in its power to bring people together, to share their stories, to remember." But as Joy hugged her family, she felt something strange happening. The park around them was changing, aging backwards and forwards all at once. Rust disappeared from the gates, paint freshened on the signs, but something else was happening too. Something bigger. "Look!" Her grandmother pointed at the sky. The three moons were moving, coming together like pieces of a puzzle. But instead of crashing, they merged into something Joy had never seen before. A sky full of endless possibilities. Her grandfather smiled. "Now comes the hardest part of our adventure, Joy. Are you ready?" Joy looked at him, confused. "Ready for what?" That's when she noticed her hands were starting to glow with the same rainbow light as the carousel's stars. Joy looked at her glowing hands in wonder. The rainbow light spread up her arms like gentle flames. The white horse bowed its head to her, its glass eyes reflecting thousands of different moments in time. "The carousel doesn't need keepers of time," her mother explained, smiling proudly. "But it does need a story keeper, someone to help people share their most precious moments, to remind them that every turn of time has its own magic." "Me?" Joy's voice squeaked. "But I'm just a kid." Her grandmother laughed, the sound like silver bells. "I was just a kid too when I first found the carousel's magic. Being young means you still remember how to believe in impossible things." The park around them had finished changing. It wasn't old and broken anymore, but it wasn't exactly new either. It looked timeless, like a place where all moments could exist together. "Watch this," her grandfather said. He waved his hand and the carousel began to fill with new riders, real ones this time, not ghosts. Joy saw a crying little boy who missed his dog that had died. On the next horse, an old woman who wanted to remember her wedding day. Then a teenager trying to decide about his future. The white horse spoke again. "These are the people who need the carousel most. Not to change their time, but to understand it better. To find the magic in their own stories." Joy felt the rainbow light fill her heart. She knew what to do. Walking up to the crying boy, she touched his horse gently. In the mirrors around them, he saw his dog again, not to keep, but to say a proper goodbye. The old woman's horse showed her not just her wedding day, but all the love that came after. The teenager saw not one future, but all the wonderful possibilities ahead of him. "The timekeeper tried to control time," Joy said, understanding more with each moment. "But time isn't meant to be controlled. It's meant to be experienced, remembered, shared." Her mother hugged her again. "And that's why the carousel chose you. You didn't try to change time. You tried to understand it." But then Joy noticed something else. In one of the mirrors, she saw Mr. Mystery, not her grandfather anymore, but the lonely figure who had been trapped for so long. He was starting to fade away. "What's happening to him?" Joy asked worriedly. Her actual grandfather, standing beside her, smiled gently. "That version of me, the one trapped in time, doesn't need to exist anymore. But don't worry. The story he helped create will always be part of the Carousel's magic. The white horse stepped forward one last time. Joy Walker, are you ready to become the story keeper, to help people find the magic in their own times? Joy looked at her family, past, present, and future all together. She looked at the people on the carousel, each finding what they needed in their own moments. She felt the rainbow light that now lived inside her, warm and bright and full of endless possibilities. But before she could answer, a shadow passed over the park. The 3 hourglasses in the center pole started shaking. Something was coming, something that even the carousel's magic hadn't expected. A dark cloud swirled above the carousel, taking the shape of something ancient and powerful. From it emerged the shadow spinner, a creature made of forgotten memories and lost time. Unlike the timekeeper who wanted to control time, the shadow spinner fed on forgotten stories. So, its voice whispered like pages turning in an old book. A new story keeper rises. But what good are stories if they can be forgotten? The shadow spinner waved its misty hand, and suddenly people on the carousel started to look confused. The little boy couldn't remember his dog's name. The old woman's wedding memories began to fade. Even Joy's family looked worried, their shared memories growing dim. "Stop it!" Joy shouted. But the rainbow light inside her flickered like a candle in the wind. The white horse's stars started to dim. The shadow spinner laughed. "You see, all stories end, all memories fade. Time erases everything in the end." But then Joy saw something in the carousel's mirrors. Not just reflections, but tiny scenes playing out. A mother telling her child a bedtime story. Friends sharing old photos. Grandparents passing down family tales. Each memory created a tiny spark of light. "You're wrong," Joy said, standing taller. "Stories don't end when they're shared." She touched the crying boy's horse again, but this time, instead of just showing him his dog, she helped him remember all the happy stories he could tell about his pet. The old woman's memories sparked new stories in her grandchildren. The teenager realized he could write his own story, one choice at a time. The rainbow light grew stronger. The white horse's stars blazed again. Every person on the carousel began to glow as they shared their stories with each other. "What's happening?" the shadow spinner hissed, drawing back. Joy's grandmother stepped forward. "Stories shared become stories saved." Her grandfather joined in. "Memories passed down can never truly be lost." Her mother added, "And love writes itself into time forever." The shadow spinner tried to spread its darkness, but now each person on the carousel was a point of light. Their shared stories created a web of glowing threads connecting everyone together. Joy understood now. She wasn't just keeping stories, she was helping them grow. "Every story shared creates new stories," she said. "And as long as one person remembers, nothing is ever really forgotten." She raised her hands, now glowing brighter than ever. The white horse reared up, its rainbow stars shooting out like fireworks. Each star carried a story, a memory, a moment worth keeping. The shadow spinner tried to catch them, to eat them, but the stories were too strong, too bright, too alive with being shared. "No," it shrieked as the stories began to fill every shadow, every dark corner. "You can't. Stories must end. Time must forget." But then the most amazing thing happened. As the stories touched the shadow spinner, it began to change. Inside its darkness were all the forgotten stories, the lost memories, waiting to be found again. The shadow spinner's dark form cracked like an egg, and from inside poured thousands of lost stories. Joy saw forgotten birthdays, misplaced first kisses, lost adventures, all the memories people thought were gone forever. "These weren't forgotten," Joy said softly, touching a floating memory. "They were just waiting to be found again." The shadow spinner's darkness melted away, revealing an old storyteller inside. The first story keeper who had gotten lost in trying to save every story. Now freed, she smiled at Joy. "I forgot the most important thing," the old storyteller said, her voice warm like sunshine after rain. "Stories aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be set free." The carousel glowed brighter than ever. Every horse now carried its own special light, gold for happy memories, silver for current moments, and rainbow colors for dreams yet to come. The white horse stepped forward one last time. "Now you understand," it said to Joy. "Your job isn't to keep time or trap memories. It's to help stories find their way home." Joy looked at all the people on the carousel, the little boy now telling stories about his dog to other children, The old woman sharing her love story with young couples, the teenager writing his future story one page at a time. Her family stood together, 3 generations of time weavers, their own story still growing. The 3 hourglasses in the center pole spun one final time, their sand mixing together to create something new. A book that wrote itself, pages turning endlessly, each one filled with stories waiting to be shared. "Ready for your first official job as story keeper?" her mom asked with a twinkle in her eye. Joy nodded, feeling the rainbow light settle inside her like a warm hug. She knew what to do. Walking to the center of the carousel, she opened the magical book and began to read. Once upon a time, there was a very special carousel, but its real magic wasn't in making people younger or older. Its magic was in helping them find their own stories, share their own memories, and remember that every moment, past, present, or future, is part of something bigger. The carousel began to turn again, but differently now. Instead of trying to change time, it helped people see the beauty in their own times. The old storyteller joined Joy's family as they watched new writers come and go, each finding what they needed in their own stories. And if you visit Wonder Wheel Park today, you might see a young girl with rainbow lights in her hair, helping people find their lost stories. You might hear the gentle music of a carousel that spins tales instead of just horses. You might even catch a glimpse of a white horse with rainbow stars, winking at you through its glass eyes. Because every ride tells a story. Every story holds a memory. Every memory makes magic. And time is just the paper we write our stories on.